Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday, June 17th Committee of the Whole meeting. I'll now call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Schultz.
Here.
Latta.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Hallbaker.
Here.
Ganfield. Chrisman.
Here.
Dunn. Here. Councilmember Ganfield absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we'll move on to item number 1, parking study report. So we do have John Forster and Joshua Roseboom with Fishbeck here to give presentation, if you guys like to take it away. And I will really quick while they're coming up and getting ready. Tonight is really just for collecting the information. You guys have put a lot of work into the research over the last
6 months.
6 months.
Yep.
And so tonight we won't have time to really dive into the conversation. We'll be looking to schedule an additional future work session committee meeting to dig into it. So tonight is really just get the information, ask clarifying questions, and just really make sure we're all on the same page with the information. So any questions before we jump into it? All right, take it away, guys.
Thank you very much. I'm John. This is Josh. So thanks for having us here tonight. We're looking forward to talking about parking. Just real quick, some of the goals of the study. We did parking counts. We wanted to really understand how many cars were downtown. We did community input. I did interviews with people. We did a community survey, and we did 2 open house sessions where people were invited to come in and talk about parking. The real question from the very beginning is, does downtown need a parking structure? And so we're gonna give our opinion on that. And we developed some concepts and operating procedures, and start talking a little bit. If there's a parking structure, does that mean paid parking is necessary downtown? It's all part of the same conversation. So again, those stakeholder interviews, the public forums, we had over 1,400, almost 1,500 respondents to the community survey, which is outstanding. And the counts we did were on, back in December, and we also took the historic counts that staff's been doing for the last 5 years. So we have all that data to really talk about how many cars are actually downtown. Really, the stakeholder interviews, the public forums were great. People love it here. They love their downtown. There's differing opinions on how it should be managed, but people really love their downtown, and that came through loud and clear. There was a concern about parking supply, and if development continues and new opportunities continue to rise, do we have enough, and where will we be? There was a lot of talk without being prompted about a parking structure, but I do feel like the question of who would pay for it and how would we as a community pay for it kind of overwhelms that conversation a lot of the time. Mixed feelings on paid parking, and then I heard a lot that, hey, we need to make a decision one way or another, either a parking structure and move forward, or no, and let's not talk about it again for another 5 years or so. So kind of got some, I will say the people of Cedar Falls have opinions, and it was good to hear them. So I had a good time in those meetings. The survey, again, at the end of it, with all the open-ended comments and everything else, it was over 100 pages of results. They range from, we don't want a garage, we don't want it free, don't do anything, don't touch downtown, to yes, we'd like a garage, we're happy to pay for it, keep it going. And both sides threatened to never show up again if you changed it. So, but I say, don't ignore, but don't overly weigh some of the harshest comments. That's why you do a survey with 1,400 people. Where did we settle out? Where are the averages? And like I said, most respondents just love downtown. They think it's great, and they just have different views on maybe how it should move forward. Although I did say 69% did characterize finding a space as difficult, either somewhat difficult or difficult and inconvenient. That's a pretty high number. Weekends and evenings were your most difficult. It's a bit of an entertainment district, and people recognize that. I was impressed. 65% say 2 or 3 blocks is a reasonable walking. 3 blocks is a reasonable walking distance for most people. 80% said more parking is needed, and about half, a little over half, said parking on Main Street should be free. So you were kind of split down the middle there. So on the counts, we created some zones to try to really define things a little bit more. We know different parts of downtown are busier than others. We created this zone as kind of the core of downtown. It includes Main Street, State Street, Washington, and kind of over to City Hall on the side streets. So here's our counts. Again, Santa Claus was in town the night we were here on the 7th, so it was really busy. The core of downtown was overparked. You actually had more cars than parking spots on that night. It was really busy. Anybody who was here knows it was awesome, and people really enjoyed it. And we stayed through the weekend, and that Saturday night, you were over 80% occupied at 6 p.m., and that was a cold, blustery, snowy evening, too. So both nights showed people are willing to come downtown. People like to be downtown. That Saturday night, the only really empty spaces in all of downtown were at Viking Pump and along 4th Street in front of Viking Pump. That was it in the core part of downtown. And that shows on the maps. You can see the red is over 90%, and everything but that area right over there by Viking Pump was full. Even going back in history, even during COVID, you were pretty busy. The map on the right is from October of 21. So downtown's been moving along well for several years. So we took some of the historical data that's been collected by staff, and you can see 2018 was busier. We went through COVID. I feel like in a lot of communities we're starting to shake out what life's going to be like after COVID now. We're whatever now is, we're there. And you can kind of see this is all zones in that entire downtown. This is the core. And you can kind of see that U shape. We're as busy in 2018. We had COVID, and things are bouncing back. In some ways, I think you've bounced back even stronger than you were in 2018. More cars. So your downtown is active and busy. And then again, the one night above your capacity when we were here was interesting. Again, coming back, bounce back from downtown. Core is busy. It just is. I don't know. Who here tries to park on Main Street? If you're used to downtown, you probably avoid it because you know it's going to be full. There's only going to be one spot. So downtown is great. It's growing, and it continues to be busy. So we were given a few opportunities for development, a couple developments, private developments in the Cedar River experience. So we did look at what impact those might have in the future as those come online. It's my understanding that the Pat and Diner is now open and part of the community, so it'd be interesting to see the impact it has and the Cedar River experience. It's really hard to gauge something like that, but I do think it could bring on a busy weekend, on a nice weekend, 20 to 40 additional vehicles into downtown, which really kind of pushes you when you're already at 95%. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but a very interesting new dynamic to downtown. So with all that said, I think you could bring up to 100 new cars into downtown on a busy weekend or busy weekend evening. You'll fill up to the core, even those spots at Viking Pump, and you'll have people parked throughout the city hall on a regular basis, based on those new developments. And then when you have big events like Santa Claus and some other stuff, people will spill out into your neighborhoods in the cars. One risk that you do have, if you have a low intensity use like a shop, retail is much lower intensity than, say, dining or a brewery or something like that. It's almost 4-to-1 difference in the number of cars that the same space can bring. So if you had some flip over in land uses, that could really push you up too. Again, some of the numbers right now, you're over 80% occupancy on a typical weekend. You're much higher on a busy weekend. Once you start adding the Pat and Diner and the 3rd and State developments, you start to get near 90. And then, a busy Cedar River experience night, you could easily be pushing 100% occupancy of all your downtown core parking spaces on just a regular Saturday night. And just to talk about that a little bit, what does that mean? If you're under 80% occupancy, then you've probably got some pavement sitting around that's unused. If you're 80 to 90, you're right there in your sweet spot where people can find a spot, but it's busy and it's active, and you don't have unused spots. Once you get over 90%, you start to have difficulty. Patrons get frustrated. Complaints are common. Your administration has to work harder, having to find those last few spaces. And at 95%, you're effectively full. There's ADA spaces, some short-term spaces, and some others that may be open, but it's really hard to find. At that point, people say, I can't find a spot, and enough bad experiences, and they'll stop coming downtown. That's where they self-select out, is what happens at that point. Your financial situation, the parking fund at the end of fiscal '23 had $450,000 in it. Right now, your free parking system operates at a deficit of between $100,000 to $200,000 per year. So that balance will be exhausted here in the next few years. So your free parking system will be costing a little bit more in the future. And that's part of the discussion. If we're going to talk finances and we're going to talk paid parking, your free system's going to cost the city money. A paid system's going to cost the city money. So balancing all that out is worth the discussion.
Just in case anybody's wondering, if they're listening, you just want to explain what you mean by the free system. Essentially just the fact that we currently have free parking and
you can come downtown and park for free is the free system. It's free. It's free to anybody who parks on street or hourly in the lots.
And then those deficits essentially come from staff to maintain, write tickets, parking, but then also maintenance of the parking lots, everything that goes into just keeping that system there.
Staffing, utilities, yeah, but Jen, right? I'm correct. The capital improvements to the parking lots, capital maintenance has been pulled out.
Correct. On the CIP, we usually show like a GO funding or something now because we knew the parking fund really can't afford it to keep the capital in there.
So any asphalt repairs or anything like that is actually coming from another bucket. This is just operational expenses. So with all that being kind of the groundwork of what we've seen, really flowing into findings and recommendations, you got a great, vibrant downtown. The core is full and busy, and new opportunities are going to push you up near 100%. So your options to address that are build more parking. You can build enough parking to meet demand. Your second option is to utilize what you have, which is on street, which means pushing people out into the neighborhoods, having them park in front of people's houses, and asking them to walk 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks to downtown. The other is to limit parking supply, which would mean not building more and maybe putting in a policy not letting them build in the neighborhood and let people choose to either get downtown through other means, carpool, bike, or choose not to be downtown. I think there is a risk in that of some people just choosing, if I can't drive, I'm not going. But it is a choice that a lot of communities make that they're not gonna, that they want to get people on their bikes or on their feet or doing something different. So I want to put all three out there as options to address the fact that you're close to maxing out your parking supply. And with that goes, you know, you're looking at your downtown plan, your vision plan. Believe if you're really going to achieve your downtown vision plan, you're going to need additional parking. Development along Washington Street is going to struggle, and development further south is going to struggle without additional parking. You're close to full now, so trying to get, or you'll end up with someone will buy property and they'll put a building up and they'll put a parking lot right beside it, and that's not really downtown. That's the suburbs, and so that's some of the risks you run if there's not enough public spaces available. Just talking a little bit about parking structures, I hope everybody understands they don't have to be ugly. Some are. They don't have to be. They can fit in with your neighborhood really well. You have character areas that you defined in your downtown vision plan. When it's possible, when it works, putting in some mixed use on the ground floor or as people walk by and as they see, you know, residential wrapped around the ends, you know, anything to kind of make it not look like a big gray box, because it doesn't have to look like that. It should be located for ease of use and driving. Really, a well-positioned parking structure should cut down on cruising and people driving around looking for a spot. And always designed with safety in mind. Modern garages have glass back stair towers, lots of sight lines. We don't put big walls in the middle of them anymore. You can see from one side to another. Just designed with those passive security elements that make people feel like it's okay to be in here. It's not a big concrete box that I can't see out of. Some advantages of going with parking structures: opens lots for development opportunities. It helps densify downtown. It does consolidate parking in a few spots. I know a lot of people go to that one lot off 2nd Street and State because that's the biggest lot in town, and they just go there. And I've watched them drive around there looking for a spot and then head back out because it's full a lot. It's my opinion, patrons really want low hassle parking. Free is awesome, low hassle is better. I go, I park where I want, and I get to where I'm going. I go to enjoy my evening. And brick and mortar projects do energize downtowns. They make it feel like, hey, there's some vibrancy and there's some things going on here. There are risks with parking structures. You're making a commitment of land and money. You know, and right now with building costs over the last few years, you're talking about $40,000 a space, up to 70, depending on what you do. If you have an economic downturn and you're counting on revenues, those can dip a little. If that's how you're funding your structure. And transportation habits do change over time. I think that's a low risk. I don't think you're building a subway anytime soon in Cedar Falls. I think this is a driving community for the foreseeable future. But it is a risk. Things do change over time, and our communities do change. Josh is going to talk a little bit about what a structure might look like.
Thank you. We looked at a couple of different parking structure concepts. These are fairly generic. You have a fairly regular street grid, so these parking structures that we're looking at could fit on a number of sites that you might look at. We looked at the one on the screen is with commercial development at grade, and then the next slide we'll talk about an all parking concept. So they're all very intuitive, open, easy to use parking functions. We went to 4 levels for both, maybe 4.5, and this one. And that's to try to, we had to stay within the city's height restrictions are 50 feet. So this is maxed out at 49. And we had just over 300 parking spaces with, as John mentioned, the target we're trying to get to is a net 250 parking spaces. And that would be new parking spaces minus whatever's currently there. Most of the sites that you might be looking at have parking lots now, so we have to offset those spaces that you have currently. So this concept you're looking at here, again, is commercial space at grade at the street level. Kind of activates the street and is often desirable. But there's some drawbacks. Again, we had to go taller with this structure. That first, you can see there's this ramp. We can't park on that ramp. The ramp has to be steeper to get above with it for higher floor-to-floor. And then we looked at an parking structure, none of that commercial at grade. This is a shorter structure, a few more parking spaces, a little more efficient, but the same basic concept and function. There's other options for mixed-use development. We looked at the commercial at grade. The height restriction, which we don't have an opinion on whether that should be bigger, greater, or not. The 50 feet is rather restrictive to try to build on top of a parking structure. We have a couple levels of parking, maybe, we wanted like 3 or 4 levels just to get that net gain. If we try to mix in some kind of commercial or residential on top, that has to shrink the parking, and now we're combating the increased demand from that development on top, as well as, again, those parking spaces that we're offsetting that we lost in the parking lot. So unless there's a desire to increase that building height, this may not make sense in downtown Cedar Falls. Other options, though, if it might require a little bit bigger site or maybe a slightly less efficient parking structure, liner buildings are another option. You can put on 1, 2, or 3, sometimes even 4. There's other implications there with a similar size 4-story building. So, and that's, again, it can be commercial or residential. Often it will see commercial at grade and residential above, and the parking is hidden in the back. We looked at some costs, just kind of some budgetary numbers, again, with these generic concepts that we looked at. This is with the commercial at grade, that first one that we showed you. It's just a white box commercial space at grade, so that would be as a storefront. It's somewhat finished space, but doesn't have the leased space set up. It didn't include a mobility hub or any kind of residential. And then in comparison, the no commercial space option. Again, it was a shorter building, didn't have the extra cost included for that white box commercial. And the differential is about approximately 5 million, budgetary number 15 versus 20.
And then some of your ongoing costs, you got your construction costs, which is likely converted to debt, but you do have those operations costs, utilities, snow and ice control, staffing, housekeeping, that all go with it. Maintenance, which is your capital maintenance, concrete. Parking structures do break down if you don't take care of them, so you do have to take care of your concrete and your sealants and things like that. And then if you do have that debt, that's a fixed cost. Over time, it becomes a better deal, but up front, it's a big part of the cost of the structure annually. Talking about operations, way we would envision a parking structure in this community working would be gateless, similar to the lots. You wouldn't pull a ticket or anything. You'd go in. And you would park. You might have a permit, which would allow you to park without any. You just pull in, park. You might, if there were paid parking, you'd pay daily. You would pay at the kiosk, or you pay on your mobile app. But I don't see a reason for gates. You have a parking department already, so you have some staffing. I don't see a whole lot of additional staffing coming out of this. A little extra housekeeping, emptying the trash and keeping up on things a few hours a week. But you have administrative staff in place now. So let's talk about paid parking. It really accomplishes two things. One is it's a management tool that helps you guide people where you'd like them. More expensive parking is probably the most premium, the spots people want to be in the most. Some people are willing to pay for that. Some people are a little more price sensitive. Well, let's offer some low cost or no cost options for them so that they can be somewhere. It's a management tool to help you effectively manage your parking supply. Paid parking also provides revenue for infrastructure, and that's what it helps do, is helps you build more parking, build more mobility, and increase the opportunities for your downtown to accommodate all the people who want to be there. It does change the way people think about things. It might even encourage some people who have some private property to open up their property. It might create a little bit of a market. Hey, I've got 10 extra spots I'm not using. Maybe I'll rent them to the person next to me on a monthly basis so that their staff doesn't have to look around for spots. I like higher rates for on-street parking. Again, I think a somewhat market-driven approach for the most premium spots are the highest price, and people can choose to use those. I do think making it easy to pay is key if you're going to have paid parking. Don't frustrate me before I get to where I'm going. Make it easy for me to pay. I do like an opportunity to put a credit on a mobile app or something like that for anybody who signs up. And so maybe the first 3 times they come downtown, it doesn't even really cost them anything because there's a credit in there. They get used to using the system. They understand how it works, and it just feels better to them as they move forward. Again, I think free parking is great, but really more than anything, patrons want predictability and ease of use. They don't want to be late. Most of us do not arrive 20 minutes before our meeting. We want to be able to park and in 4 minutes be where we're at and meet our friends at the bar or whatever we're doing. So predictability is really important. It would be a system. I see it operating as a system where the off-street lots, the on-street parking, citations, and fines all kind of roll together to help fund things. That's what you have now, so there's not too many big changes there. Expenses, you'd have to have a rate strategy. I do think considering how maintenance falls into that is important. And then, there just might be other revenue sources. You downtown business owners, TIF, general fund. We're going to talk a little bit about finances and what $20 million versus what you might be willing to charge downtown kind of equals. Just looking at a potential paid parking area, it's the blue lines. That would not include anything that's no parking now. I'd love to see you keep your loading zones, your 15-minute zones, DoorDash, and all that stuff, and drop-offs and pickups. The more someone gets dropped off and picked up, the less spaces you actually need to build downtown, so there's real value in that. And again, it would be interesting to see. Usually what happens when a market's created and dollars are created through parking, the private sector does come in and provide a little more use of their facilities. So just running a scenario of rates, premium locations, which would be on street, $1 an hour, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday. I do think your citation rates need to be looked at. They should be at least double what a daily it would cost to park, or else you're just saying, oh, park here and get a citation, pay that every day, as opposed to actually pay. You'd rather have people pay willingly than to have to cite them repeatedly. I'd love to see you have a forgiveness program. First meter ticket a year is forgiven just because, hey, we all make mistakes or we didn't know the rules, something like that. But also habitual offenders, let's double that fine after 6 citations. You know what, we've got spots for you. There's places where you can park. Please use them and don't make us cite you all the time. Off-street parking, a little bit less, 75 cents an hour, easy to find and access in a structure. Permits are $35 a month now. I say let's stay there. Again, that makes it hard to pay for a structure at $35, $45 a month, but let's bring value to the people who are parking downtown as well. Residential permits, they want 24/7 access. They're kind of a different animal, so sometimes higher rates work for them. And as the system matures, you might consider more of a tiered rates with a few more price slots in there as you get further away from the core of downtown. Again, let's talk about the financial considerations. Debt service is on either structures over $1 million, $1.2 million and the $15 million, $1.7 million. You'd probably, talking with Jen, you'd probably issue that through general obligation bonds. There's a whole lot going into how you would acquire that money, but you got your staffing, your utilities, and then your long-term maintenance all go into that. So looking at what that might look like, I think you can, at those rates that we showed, you could probably generate $1 million a year in parking revenue. Just not knowing exactly how the community respond, but at those rates, at those hours, at those times. And so you're talking about a shortfall of maybe $400,000 to $800,000 annually with the debt service on there. And so, that's real. You got to talk about that. The reality is you're already facing an annual deficit that's going to continue to grow if you don't change things anyway. So good for you. You have to have the discussion about what's the best way forward for us. And again, I think user fees and rates and collections should be the lion's share of this. And over time, you may get to a point where, especially if downtown grows, where they cover it all, and nothing's coming out from other sources. But the general fund and how do downtown business owners do the whole mix? Those are discussions that have to be had. Ran just a real rough potential cost sheet. Through that, like I said, I think the opportunity to bring in $1 million or more in parking revenue is there. Problem is expenses are going to run closer to $1.7 million, up near $2 million. So that's the challenge. That really is a challenge. You've got a great entertainment district. When you got a lot of people down here, you've got a lot of people down here, but you don't have people down here 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so that does create a bit of a challenge. Really, to fund a parking structure, you have to have about $200 per month per space for every single space in it. And we're not going to charge $200 a month to people in Cedar Falls. And so that's where it comes in as a system with on-street and others. But it is tough to meet those obligations at low rates, and then you do have great number of people here, which helps a lot. One of the options that's out there is paid parking without a structure. You've got that $200,000 annual deficit that you do have to deal with. If you did paid parking without a structure, you'd have management tools that help, again, maximize the use of your space, good pricing strategies. System would likely run a surplus. You could bank that surplus for a future parking structure. I will say it's hard to communicate the advantages of paid parking when the community doesn't really get anything new. out of the deal. And that's a tough one. And just talk about what some other cities, some other cities in the area. Coralville they charge at a couple locations. I talked to the parking director there, and the city council has just made a strong commitment to fund parking. And so they take a lot out of the general fund, both for debt service and capital maintenance every year. You know, your neighbor Waterloo, maintenance and debt, they've got some older garages. Their downtown is way different than yours. But they're going to have to fund a lot of that out of the general fund. And then in the news, very recently, in the last few weeks, Iowa City's doubled all their rates, all their parking rates, because their parking fees only covered 22% of their operating expenses. And so just idea of what's going on near you. I will say, once you're over 80%, you do have to pay attention. You have to continually manage it. That's why it's great that you already have a parking supervisor, and you're paying attention to occupancy and you know what's going on. If you do not monitor your parking, it will get on top of you quickly. So it's important to things always change. So measuring and adjusting is vital. So here, our recommendations are, you should start charging for public parking in anticipation of building a structure in the next 2 to 4 years. I'd like to see a net gain of 250 spots that allow you to have growth and allow you to accommodate new development. You hold a whole bunch of different things to use to fund it, allow future growth development opportunities. As things change, your funding mechanisms may change, and you need to conduct those regular counts just so you know where you're at. Again, the key to an effective parking system is making it easy for the users to use it. A great online experience with maps. I love how-to videos. Everybody worries that people won't use the app. They will. Show them a video, have people walk around the first 2 months, show them how to use the app. You'll be shocked. People will pick it up very quickly and they'll use it. For better or worse, we live on our phones these days, and so people will pick that up. I do think mobile payments, I have communities that are over 80% mobile payments. Their kiosks sit there, dust covered, almost unused at this point. Clear signage, I think you have great signage now, but you'll have to update it if you change your policies. Let's move slowly, a 30-day grace period. Warning citations, staff to help people as the system comes up. Different things that help people, the credit on their mobile app, a bunch of things that help them get used to the system, see the value in it, understand that they can park, that there's a place for them that they can park easily, and they can get onto their destination. But making it easy for them to use the system is vital. So kind of back to your options. You could do nothing. You could keep it all the same as it is. I do think you'll start to limit your growth opportunities through that as the parking supply reaches 100%. You could implement paid parking without a structure. It closes your deficit gap, provides some management tools, but there's not a lot to show for it from a concrete standpoint. Or you could implement paid parking and plan for a new structure. What I will say is all options have risks. None of them are perfect. You could make any of them probably work. And it's a tough choice. It is a tough choice because there is debt service with a new structure, but I think it'll allow you to unlock your downtown even further. I didn't get a single clarifying question, but we're ready.
I'm guessing it's because everyone's in full agreement with everything you said. So at this point, open up to council questions, discussion. I'm guessing everybody's got some. So yeah, go for it.
Just throw out some analytics, which I fall back on for calculating. You said $1 million a year. That's $19,230 a week. If you got 250 spots, that spot has to generate $77 to make the numbers work. And we're charging $35 a month for a permit. I think we're low on that compared to what the numbers look like for Coralville and the other places. They're considerably higher.
Yeah.
So we got to incrementally raise our fees, communicate through our quarterly publications, currents. The objective here, I think, I like the presentation. There's options, there's wiggle room in here. But it's good.
35 is low comparatively. There's no doubt about that.
Excuse me.
Counselor Schultz.
When's the last time we raised the rate on our monthly permits?
Go ahead, Marcy, go ahead.
They started off at 35.
Started at 35? For how long now?
It's been in place since 2020.
2020, it's only 4 years? Okay. COVID. Okay. So before that, we had no monthly permits downtown?
Not for cost,
Not for what cost?
not to sell per lot.
Okay. I know we had, I believe at one point, $900,000 in our parking fund, and then, of course, COVID and the kiosk experiment kind of chewed it up. How did we get to 900? Was that just fines?
Yeah, I mean, or when you think back, we used to have meters downtown also. But yeah, it was violations. You have to remember too, at one point we had 2-hour parkings, which meant there could have been a potential for more violations versus some spaces turning into 4-hour parking. So, but yeah, so that's why you'll see those. So I think in the 2018 study, just like you said, Daryl, I think it was about 900,000 was our balance when we did that last study. But when we've just had 100 to 200,000 deficit each year, that's why we're kind of at the 400,000
Sure.
now. Yep.
Counselor Schultz.
John, I thought you said it was $200 a day that the spaces cost us.
So if you're gonna cash flow a garage, you would have to make $200 per space per month in that garage.
In that garage.
By pooling the system, including on-street parking, other lots, citations and stuff, you can bring that number down. That's why in a city like this, you have to bring all those parking assets into one pool in order to be able to afford a garage. What I was trying to say is you can't build a garage and charge enough just to park in it to make it work on its own.
Well, nonetheless, no matter what we charge for parking, this isn't a money-making deal, right? This is,
I don't see it.
no, I mean, we'd have to charge a heck of a lot more
Yep.
before we even broke even. So it's an investment more than, we got to go into this knowing this is an expense, right?
Investment.
An investment. And that's part of the, have you, tell me again, I think we kind of talked about this, potential locations?
So we looked at sites, and as Josh said, your blocks are very uniform. The structure that Josh put together could fit almost anywhere in downtown. It could even fit in, I always want to call it Lot 1, but that's not right. The big lot in the northeast corner, it could even fit back there. It's a very generic, but we haven't looked at specific sites, no.
And
So-
partly, Gil, because anything for discussing actual sites would need to be executive session.
Yeah.
So we won't be getting into it
Okay.
in this conversation.
This conversation, I guess.
But you have great blocks, I'll say that. You have great blocks.
So good to know.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Counselor Hotbaker.
Councilman
No, go
Schultz,
ahead.
you done? Okay, thank you. I guess I have a question about use. I mean, you keep referring to the fact that we're maxing out and things like that. I'm looking at your slides from your studies, just for your reference, at 10 is what I'm looking at, and that's the one that has space occupancy for all the zones that you articulated. I think at roughly a little less than 1,400, the bar graphs that I'm talking about. And then you have the space occupancy downtown core, again, the same study over roughly 3 years or whatever at different months. And then I'm looking at your assessment, or the assessment, or an assessment of what percentages mean. Anything under 80% is inefficient, that slide that we're talking about. Even with the downtown core, which has an occupancy of over 700 spaces, correct? We're rarely at even the 85%, which is optimum or the best. am I wrong, or am I reading this incorrectly, that oftentimes we're actually in the 70% and there's not an upward trend in usage? And I think 70% would be, according to the labels here, actually inefficient, that we have too many spaces for use.
In your downtown core, you're above 80% both days we were here in the fall. And again, the only spaces you had were over there.
Well, then I apologize. The data then, let's look at 11, the slide.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got December 18, November 2019, 21, 23, things like that. I understand there's a couple of outlier peak times when Santa's around, but overall, I mean, rarely do we exceed 500 in usage.
Exceed 500? Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. So that 500 would be the number of people parking downtown during those times?
Correct. Yes, you're right. It's the new developments, 3 new developments that we stated is going to push you close to that 700 on your busy
Right.
nights.
Again, and this is me trying to wrap my head around
Sure.
it. So the idea is that ultimately those new developments will lead to a greater usage, and you're foreseeing a need of
100 more
if we did
spaces.
so a parking ramp would be 250, but that's a projection that you believe may happen. And a final question: do you measure, for lack of a better, turnover? Someone that goes down for an hour then leaves versus someone that squats on a spot for 8 hours.
We did not for this.
Okay.
That is a tool for sure that is used sometimes to understand how long people are staying. We focused on accumulation on this time. But I want to make sure I get this right for you.
Yeah.
And that, yes, and it goes to the one slide where it is a difficult situation in that I bet, I'm not here, I hate to suppose, but there's a lot of times if you went out there on a Monday morning or a Wednesday afternoon, you might not have a lot. But if you went out there on a Friday night, then you're over 600. And so the question really starts to become, do we want to, as we continue to evolve downtown, and I think it's fair to say downtown's kind of an entertainment district at this point. It's not a banker's district, for sure. There's not a lot of office. It'd be great if you had a little more office down there because they could use it up during the day and then still have the parking available in the evening.
Can I beg one more question? I don't want to monopolize it. Okay. But if we had that slide 11 up there, the other thing I'm thinking about is as we're figuring out these projections for increased use. So we have data points from December 2018 through December 23. Is there any way that you can measure the growth of downtown over those 5 years and how it may have affected usage? Because I'm seeing, other than the peak times, relatively flat lines. There's not a substantial upward trend.
Yeah.
So what was the impact on new development over those 5 years in parking demand? Can we measure that? In other words, in order to inform our projections for the future.
It's tough
Yeah.
right now because COVID sat in the middle of that
Right.
and made it weird. Frankly, any numbers from 20, 21, and maybe even part of 22, you got some, I think you struggle with validity on anything with those because it was just such an odd time. And so we may have a year, July of 23 and December of 23, when we counted. And again, every night is just a snapshot in time. I will say the night we were here, December 9th, there was nothing else going on. There was no events. It was just a night. And I'd love to count 40 of those a year to really understand where that's going, because I think that's the kind of data you would need to say, what are we really after COVID? Because it wrecked so much of even how we interact with our downtowns and the type of business. I mean, the commercial real estate market across the country doesn't know what to do because there's half the people sitting at a desk now than there used to be. And but what we saw this past fall was a strong rebound of your entertainment district, and that snapshot in time we did into December, I was really impressed. Wow, they've really bounced back. There's a lot of people here, a lot of people shopping and just enjoying themselves. And I do think that with the new stuff that you've got coming online, you're going to push that 700 spaces that's in the core, you're going to be at 650, 675 very often. So that's how I got to that. Did I answer your question?
You did. I wanted to make sure I was reading the graphs correctly and wasn't missing something, so I'm on the same page. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Levin.
Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. You referenced some of the other costs that are going to be associated with this, with maintenance, operations, et cetera. The piece I didn't see in there was safety and security. Are you building that into that maintenance and operations cost? What is best practice with that? Because you look at a number of communities that really have some negative perceptions, whether those are reality or not, of what happens within those parking garages. So is that accounted for in this? And maybe that's a better question for Chief Howard. I guess I don't know.
I did not account for any security staffing to have someone posted in the facility. The hope is that a parking structure is a safe place for people to be. Like I said, in the design elements, we really work to make sure they're open and that you can see across them and that there's no hidden corners, the glass-backed elevators, effective lighting, all those things that make people very comfortable. And activity is by far the best. When there's people coming and going constantly out of them, then you're less likely to get bad behavior in them. Now, that being said, they are one of the few open buildings in a downtown that if we see anything, it's the unhoused, and they tend to go there because it's covered space, and you can't really lock one, so to speak. I didn't put any costs in for that. I don't know, Chief, if you think there might be a need for additional staffing in a parking structure. I mean,
Don't mean to put you on the spot.
yeah, let's put him on the spot.
Well, I don't know about additional staffing, but maybe surveillance, cameras, something we already do and already have quite a bit downtown. That may be appropriate. We already patrol the area heavily, but it would help to probably have some type of surveillance. Problem is when you get, it would just have to be part of the structure when it was built, because any kind of wireless wouldn't work once you got into the inner workings of a cement building. So it would add costs.
And I would go so far as to say the budgetary costs that we put together are for a modern parking structure that would have some level of cameras and certainly technology that would accommodate that.
Sure.
And as John said, there's a lot of passive security features that typically are built in, the glass stairs, you want it open, no hiding places, things like that.
And these are smaller garage, like, you're never that far from actual sunlight because it's only 2 bays wide. So no matter where you're at, you're 30 feet from the edge. A big, 600, 700, 800 space garage, big garage, it becomes a little more of a daunting task with that, yeah.
Last question, if I could. So you described kind of your survey results with 69% of people saying that parking is difficult, 37, or whatever the numbers were. Was there anything in there that really surprised you?
That surprised me? So what I had heard when I came initially, and a comment that I think we heard at the open house sessions that we had, was that people don't like to walk in Cedar Falls, that they want to be within a half a block of where they're going. I was pretty pleasantly surprised that 65 or whatever the number was, people were willing to walk 2 or 3 blocks. And the reason I was surprised is because people always underestimate on that. You know, if you ask someone, would you rather have paid parking or free parking? Well, 98% are going to say I'd rather have free parking. Likewise, people are going to say, oh, I'm only going to walk a block or 2. So I was really pleasantly surprised by that. I think maybe the people who can, you have to have spots for people who have mobility issues, but people who can, I think, are pretty willing to walk because the parkade's really nice. Yeah. And they don't mind going up and down it from end to end, really. And I observed that too when I was counting cars out here. Just a lot of activity, a lot of people just up and down the street.
Do you have anything?
No. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just throw out some more thoughts here. The 2 to 3 block number you mentioned for walking, I'm assuming that's from parking your car to get to Main Street, because Main Street is 5 or even 6 blocks long if you go to Casey's and get a slice or whatever you do, you know. So you end up walking a lot more than 2-3 blocks.
That's from your car to your destination.
Yeah,
is the assumption. Yeah.
okay. One of the numbers that I came up with some time ago, I looked at the seating capacity for the current bars and restaurants downtown is right around 4,000. And then I said to myself, if they're all half full and everybody comes 2 in a car, you need 1,000 cars to do that half point. And at one point, I believe we had 790 street spots. So that's what I remember from back in the day when we talked about it. We might have added a little bit. So we're at the point, like you describe here, close to the warm fuzzy spot quite often.
Yep. I think, again, for if we want to talk about exactly right now, with no changes, I wouldn't suggest a parking structure.
Sure. Well, then, really going forward, it's a matter of how many storefronts recover. Some closed, some changed because of COVID. And if we can keep incrementally going up from there and then build revenue through a parking method, some sort of paid parking, seems like.
I know Councilmember Chrisman, you had something.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for putting this together. I had a great time chatting with John for probably way too long about all of the information and kind of how parking happens downtown. So it was really interesting to me, and there's a lot of good information in this presentation. So for anybody who's watching, definitely check out the full packet, and if you've got questions, hopefully you can find it in there. I was just wondering, so right now on a busy night, we're at 100% at the core. Assuming we would build a parking structure on those busy nights, then are we expecting that the result would bring that down to kind of that optimal level? Or is that just something that when it's busy, it's going to be at 100%?
So if you build a structure, initially you would bring that number down into the 80s, maybe even the 70s for a short time. But the opportunity is then, we have available parking. Let's develop some of our parking lots that we're currently using, and let's use them. That's the whole point of aggregating the parking. So might dip, or your percentage of occupancy might dip because you have greater inventory for a while, but I would expect it to go right up as your city continues to grow. I expect you to have this conversation again in 9 years. Okay, I don't know if I'll be here, but I expect you'll be having this conversation again about your second garage in about 9 years, as your city continues to grow. I mean, it's a success story. So, and I from your vision plan, it looks like you want to continue that.
Great, yeah, and I think that's something that folks should definitely keep in mind, that this isn't just we put in a parking structure, now you could park right in front of the place that you want to go. The other thing that I had, just for the sake of asking, for one of our more well-known citizens, Rosemary Beach, will this structure include a public bathroom?
I would be frank.
Be careful how you answer that.
Be frank that we're not big fans of that, but that's a decision that you would make as a community. Is do you need that? And if you need a public restroom, it can be a place where it can fit for sure.
See, politically, we're just going to be like, nope, consultant said can't do it, as much as we would love to.
So, I mean, we all know the issues with public restrooms, so, but it can be a place, we can fit it.
Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I do have a question, because I just want to make sure I heard correctly. So the thought process is, and correct me if I didn't hear you correctly just a second ago, that when you build the parking garage and you add those additional spaces, that then opens up the opportunity, if wished upon and people wanted to, and city okayed it, that maybe current parking lots could be developed. So essentially, you're consolidating some of those lots, so there's an opportunity for growth. Did I hear that correctly?
That would be one of the goals, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And I know just from talking with staff and getting into the weeds, there's a lot of weeds. Like there's a lot we can talk about in the pricing structures, talking about placement based on where we're looking to grow downtown. Is it trying to incentivize new development? Can people do parking in lieu of, because this building's there, and rather than build it on site, they can pay for some space at the ramp. So there's a lot of details in there. I know just from talking with staff and knowing there's years of history behind parking discussions in this community. I've heard it a few times. I think we'll be looking to as the next discussion meeting is really trying to get to, is this really something we want to look into and have staff look into? Because I think from talking with you guys, strong recommendation was can't really half commit to something like this. It's really, if you're going to move forward with paid parking, it really needs to be heading towards something. If you're just going to do paid parking and say, well, now we're paying for everything, but nothing's changed, we're not building a ramp, it's kind of hard to justify doing that. So I think that'll be the important discussion for us, is to make sure, it's going to be a lot of conversations, because I don't think we're looking to make a decision on this in the next few months even. This is going to take a lot more community input, work session time, discussions, but just trying to make sure, at least for today, that everyone's kind of on the same page about what the information is currently, what the needs are, and then we'll have more time in the next work session discussion to really get into details, but.
Thought.
Councilman Cruz.
We'd have to see how receptive the public is to any charging downtown at all, other than the $35. And if we put in parking kiosks or whatever those, stations are, and how receptive everybody will be to that. And I'll tell you right away. So,
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I do think that was part of the recommendation, correct? Was to implement paid parking downtown sooner than later
right.
as a barometer for that, if nothing else.
Yeah. What I would say is don't run it as a 60-day trial, because you'll have 60 days of this is a nightmare. You just do it. Say, if you want to say a trial time, say 2 years, because it does take some time to get used to it. It is, I recognize it's another step in your journey that you have to stop. I love the mobile apps. 10 years ago, I'd have said I hate the mobile apps because they were clunky and hard. Now, you can pay before you turn your engine off, and you're set for the next 3 hours before you even turn your car off. It's just a matter of really working with the community to help them understand the technology and how to use it, and to feel comfortable with it. And again, sure, we'd all prefer it to be free, but
There's no such thing as free.
extra infrastructure costs money,
And we asked that question in the survey too, about paid parking too.
Yeah, and people, it wasn't 90% are willing to pay, but I don't remember the exact number, but a good percentage were willing to pay, even in the survey, which is, I think, very telling.
So any other questions, discussion from council? We've still got like half an hour.
I think it was 50/50. I think the split was 50/50 on
Yeah.
if they pay or.
48, 52.
51.
Whoa,
52% said
52% were good.
48 said willing to pay.
Yeah.
Close to
Close, though.
50/50.
So
That's a good number, really.
it's more than I expected.
So, yeah.
So quick question then, discussion for council is, I think next step would be we'd look to schedule a work session to really sit down and start going through the detailed discussion on this. Is there any additional information you guys would like to see from either more details from the surveys, anything we can work on with staff to get more details on before that next work session, but anything else we'd like to see or have ready for that meeting?
I'd like to ask,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Chrisman.
I would like more information on how a parking structure would affect our required parking when putting in a new building. If we currently are requiring an adequate amount, or if that would require less. Obviously we've discussed that there's some potential to say, okay, you could use the ramp in lieu of. So I think getting additional information so that we can have all of that in front of us would be helpful.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz.
You had said that the net was going to be about 250 spaces. Is that in consideration of commercial use on a bottom floor or a housing up on top, or is it sort of kind of around 250?
That's definitely a round number. I'd like to see you gain 250. I think if you gain less than that, you're not going to, you don't free up those spots. There's not much to grow into. Again, there's a little grown into it that I think you want to do. And 250 is that number. For this, so I think this one has 304 spaces with the retail. And then this one has 339. So that retail, having the retail space there and then having the jump ramp to get up over the top of it for the second level of parking does cost you some spaces.
But the net, though, that's why there are over 300 parking spaces, because we're realizing that there are currently roughly, let's say, 50 parking spaces on the site, right?
One level.
So the 300 minus the existing is a
Right.
net gain of the 250.
Well, and my thought too was if we add commercial, we've increased the demand, or if we add housing, then we increase the demand.
You're right.
Correct.
So, and if those are part of the commercial or part of the housing, so, okay.
Yeah.
Just another question too, and we'll see if it's okay for somebody to get excited about it, but you were mentioning more than once that the 50-foot restriction really inhibited your design. Are you suggesting that we should consider something of a 51-foot? Or
No, not at all. Not at all. That was just the constraint that we were working with. So we talked about, your street grids are pretty uniform, but there's also a uniform dimension. So there's boundaries on sites and a height limit, and we fit a parking structure in that box. So the 50 foot, so with the commercial, we went to 49 feet, and that's how many parking spaces we came up with for that generic parking structure. Given a specific site, there's other parameters you tailor it to, and the parking count will vary. With the non-commercial, it could have been a little taller, honestly. The commercial was about a half a level taller just to try to get above that 300. The non-commercial parking structure we could add a level to that and get closer to 400 spaces, honestly. So we were actually less than,
What's
we're trying
that-
to shoot for that net.
what's that rise on the first ramp? You said is it between 30 and 50 degrees, or how significant is that? Is it quite steep, or?
It's about 10%. So the building code allows us to park on about 6.5%. So this is too steep, and that's why you don't see parking spaces on there. And then that was a function of the commercial space needs more headroom than parking too.
First, you cost me a bet because I told him no one would ask that.
Thank you.
And second, I think our biggest concern on the height was trying to put something on top of it, like the idea of putting a couple levels of residential on top. Love the idea, but once you have to fit under that 50, you build a whole bunch of structure and you have the same number of parking spaces. And so you didn't really gain any parking to that. You have a great development, but you didn't gain any parking. So.
Yeah, that was part of my question back on what's the real net then if we do those things and we don't really gain any parking spots from it because it's being used by the housing or it's been used by that business that is there.
Correct.
Like you said, then that's when you build the second ramp.
In 9 years.
In 9 years.
Councilman Cruz.
Thank you. Your examples in here were Iowa cities. I'm assuming, consult across the nation, or at least the Midwest.
Yes.
Could you come up with some examples? I'd like to see other communities that, with a typical block, something like we have, that you've gone and had 4 or 5 stories parking and wraparound commercial, and then residential on top, views, penthouse views and things. bring us numbers. I know people have told me down in Atlanta, Georgia, there's tons of these places with residential on the top, and other communities I can think of where I've traveled. I'd like to see numbers on that you've worked with, to give an example. And then,
Real quick, like dollar amounts of what that facility would cost?
yeah, I mean, if you've consulted, now you just blow off the dust off a file and say, here's what we did 5 years ago, and it's worked really well since then, maybe. And then the potential of leaping over from one parking area to the next block with a aerial roadway between the two and connect, because we have opportunity there potentially. Then you don't need as many up ramps or down ramps.
Are you saying connecting the vehicular bridge from parking ramp to parking ramp, or are you?
Yeah, go to the next city block.
Okay.
If you've done something like that or seen that.
Parking structures over streets, yes, is typically, then you're parking on those over the road as well, yes.
Yeah, love to see that.
Okay.
Get creative. Get our money's worth here.
Might be
Just
outside-
copy the pages from your previous
Yeah.
build there.
And we can talk too, like if that's outside of scope of the original, if that's something we do want to look at, we can discuss that, but
Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
are we talking about something that wouldn't even fit in our current ordinance or code? I guess when we say penthouse, are we like asking to be way above what we currently have in place? Because that's, to me, that's asking these guys to do work that's not even going to be working for our current situation. So maybe I'm wrong, but if that's what we're asking, I feel like we're asking them to do something that's isn't possible anyway.
Yep, because if it was bigger buildings, it would be a discussion on, are we even interested in looking at changing that ordinance or allowing for a taller structure? Then we can't really decide that tonight, but this would be, again, the type of thing we can dig into in the next work session, so.
If you're interested in changing your parameters, there are options.
Yeah, that, if the cost-benefit ratio leans towards a wonderful thing that you've seen built in the past, I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
In general, the more complicated, obviously, the more expensive it gets. But what you ultimately want is something that works for your community.
Sure.
Is what you want, and nothing cookie cutter and nothing that doesn't serve you well. You know.
We want a penthouse with a bathroom.
But we don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
The bathroom is the penthouse. Any other council discussion, questions, or anything else you'd like us to bring for more information at the next meeting?
I was just going to say, it depends what the penthouse sells for. If it's $1 million penthouse with gold toilets and shower curtains and what,
Daryl might
I'm
buy
just
it.
babbling.
Again, I didn't extend my appreciation to John and Josh. Again, it was great talking to you particularly, and this is great information, so thank you on the work you've done here so far.
Thank you. It's fun. I enjoy your community very much. So thanks for the opportunity to just be here.
Any other discussion, comments, or anything else, again, that you want us to bring for more information? Okay, seeing none, thank you guys again
Thank
for
you.
all the time
Thank
the
you,
last
guys.
6 months, and we will call this meeting adjourned, and we will be back here at 7 o'clock for the normal city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.